Hello YouTube and welcome. I want to talk about Peter Schiff and why he believes Bitcoin has no value and why he is wrong. This is the video here, the new video he has released, and he talks about it around this period, 35 minutes plus, and you're welcome to listen to it. I'm not going to play it, but I'm going to highlight the issues that he doesn't address in it. Now, ultimately, he doesn't talk about value, and value is ultimately subjective. What that means is each individual in the world has a different perception of value, and what Peter Schiff has, he values no value in Bitcoin. His view subjectively is that Bitcoin has no value. Well, the market ultimately is wrong with him, and ultimately the market's price tells you that Bitcoin does have value, but he believes subjectively that Bitcoin has no value. And why I will prove to you now that Bitcoin does have value, and these are the points that he doesn't address when he talks about it. He believes more on subjectively that physical properties of value, like gold, when he says it's a metal, and silver, these are precious metals, and he believes in physical properties of value. And value in anything is very difficult to quantify and measure, but in Bitcoin, it isn't difficult to quantify that value, and he doesn't address this. The first thing is Bitcoin is ultimately independent of central banks. So whenever somebody invests in Bitcoin, they want something that's independent of central banks. That gives it value, Peter. The second point is it is limited in value. In supply. That's the second point of the value that it has. And it is on a secure blockchain. So there's three things there that people who invest in Bitcoin have ultimately, and the fourth thing is that they can transfer it between two people as a token. So it's a token of value, and the 4 points there that I suggest to tell you there now is that obviously it's independent of central bank control. That is not the case in gold. Gold price is ultimately controlled by the banks who put contracts onto the market and who ultimately control the price of gold. It is very shrouded in secrecy, the price of gold and silver. It has been found that these banks manipulate the price down, and it's very difficult ultimately to say, is that a fair, true price of gold and silver? And at the minute, that's ultimately very difficult to say. But Bitcoin, he doesn't address these things when he talks about the value, and obviously people do see that there's value in Bitcoin because they don't want central bank control. They want a token that's ultimately limited, ultimately can be passed between two people on secure networks, and ultimately is a token that can be stored of value and can be passed between users anywhere in the world, and it's a global store of value. He doesn't talk about that, but that's his perception, that Bitcoin has no value. He goes on to talk about, I'll just check my notes here, he goes on to talk about a Whopper having value. A place in Russia is releasing a cryptocurrency, and you can get Whoppers once you buy a cryptocurrency, tokens for Whoppers. Well, same thing again. Some person, like somebody who's overweight, views a Whopper as having lots of value, and somebody who's healthy and who's fit views it has no value, and it's a negative value to them having a Whopper burger as a cryptocurrency. So in terms of the value, you can see there that two people can view the same thing differently, and that's ultimately subjective in terms of value. And what Peter Schiff obviously looks at, he looks at things having physical properties in terms of backing it up. Bitcoin isn't like gold or silver, and he doesn't understand that in that sense. This is where value is ultimately very difficult to quantify, but it's very much so real in Bitcoin. I mean, I've just explained to you, it's very much so real, and if he can address those points that I've raised in terms of the value, that is where it is at the minute. And in terms of the value, that is ultimately, value is very much so subjective. But look, if there's so many people in the world view Bitcoin as having value, then Peter, you're wrong, and ultimately you will be wrong for a long time. You may believe that it has no value, but if there's enough people believe that it does have value, then it will go up for a long time to go, and a long time to continue. The most difficult thing in anything, and Peter Schiff as a good leader, he has a very big following, and he's leading a lot of people. It's very difficult whenever you're wrong to accept your failures and to say to yourself, well, I was wrong on this, and I will look at it again and I will answer the questions, and I will look at value and I will answer the questions, and I will say I'm wrong, and I believe that there is value in it. So it's very difficult when you've come out strongly against something and the price action has moved against you and you're continuing down a line of it. It's very difficult, and that's one of the most difficult things, and they've found it, psychologists have found it in a lot of places. Even whenever bad businesses are going under and the leader at the top, the CEO, still believes that they're right, and they continue to go down the track that they're right. That's the hardest thing to do, is to accept your failures. And look, in terms of this, sometimes you just have to accept that in this terms, clearly the market has told you there's value there, and you have to address that there must be value there, and people do believe that there's a demand for that. I mean, that's the value. Ultimately, you can clearly see that's the value. People want an independent from central banks, limited supply token where they can invest their money, and if it goes down, it goes down, but they've got a token that's independent of central banks. They no longer want currency. They no longer want government-backed money. That's the bottom line. They no longer want it. Gold is clearly a backed currency by the government. The government's control gold and silver, and people do not want any more currencies based on gold and silver, and that gives it value. It gives it value straight up. It gives it value. It's an open source currency. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and gold and silver are a manipulated gold by the banks. That is a part of the government. So there's value there in it, and Peter, that has to be addressed. That aspect has to be addressed from it. As the community builds in Bitcoin, it will only go higher because people more and more will want not to be in a currency with the governments. And that is it, truly. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've raised a couple of points. I would love to hear your thoughts on the points, and let me know what you think. And subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much.